Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Tonight's show is made possible because of the enormously wonderful coffee coming from the Organic Man Coffee Trike on McPherson here in Laredo. 4501 McPherson. Their hours are 6:30 a.m. until 7 p.m. If you're not in Laredo, you can get the best coffee on the planet by going to organicmancoffee.shop. The August 11th, I'll be at the Edinburgh UFO Festival. It's at City Hall in Edinburgh, 200 7th Street. The festival will begin at 5 p.m. and end at 10. I'll have that box of books I ordered for the McAllen Library, and my square has been fixed. I hope to get a haircut by then as well, provided Diana is back in business. Well, not in business, back from Mexico. You know how I always talk about supporting small business? Well, you can't get much smaller than Diana. She's the owner operator, head CEO, and she sweeps the floor at night. I would give out her contact information, but her only contact information is her cell phone, and I'm not giving that out. But support small businesses in your community. It will make your community a better place to live. Okay, well, keep in mind Christmas is right around the corner, and books make great Christmas presents. They're easy to wrap. They don't require batteries. If you drop them, they don't break. And if the person that gets a book isn't a reader, they can always give it to somebody else and act like they were thinking of them the whole time. Stop on by, say hi if you see me there at Edinburgh. You don't even have to buy a book, just say hello. Hopefully, I'll have a haircut by then. Roddy Fry asked me about caves and things that just might live in them. He was listening to another podcast about the Mammoth Caverns and hobgoblins that were supposed to live in them. Weird beings that are reported to have been seen deep inside the cave. A hobgoblin is a household spirit. It's supposed to live in a person's house. They're kind of like beneficial. If you have a hobgoblin, it's supposed to be a good thing. Well, I've been to Mammoth Cave a few times, years and years ago, and I'd really like to go back sometime. If I ever get rich, or at least more wealthy than I am now, I am going to have to travel the country seeing all the sights that are cool and interesting. Right now, it's just not in the budget. That and my wife is fixing to go back to school as a teacher, and it's not much fun traveling alone. Cave creatures, beings that live in caves, and sometimes they use us for food. This could make visiting Mammoth Caverns a bad idea. At least we don't have the Charufas living in our country. The Charufas are found in Chile. They make their homes in the caverns of active volcanoes, where they have not only adapted to surviving in the extreme heat, but the gases aren't deadly to them either. Somehow they manage to thrive in the red hot magma and lava that is found deep underground. The Charufas physiology lets it feed off the radiating heat, providing sustenance for the creature as well as making its wounds heal. A Charufas stands about 18 feet tall and it weighs about 8,000 pounds. As long as it remains near a heat source, the creature can live for hundreds or even thousands of years. They are also described as possibly being humanoid reptilian creatures. Some cultures used to worship the Charufas, believing they were gods or maybe dragons. The Charufas is described as having a malicious personality, and it enjoyed receiving sacrifices from time to time. The creatures were said to toy with a sacrifice for days before finally killing them and having dinner, or maybe it was lunch. Cherufis would make their way up from the bottoms of the volcanoes and cause earthquakes. The villagers, believing the only way to get the creatures to go back to its lair was by offering it one of their members. Someone either volunteered or was voluntold to go visit the monster so the rest of them could get on with their lives. This was usually a young female, since the old men were the ones making the decisions. The volunteer would sometimes reappear when the monster set them on fire and threw them back into the village. A flying, flaming human. This would create more fear among the locals, who would go to great lengths to keep the Cherufis happy. Due to these long lifespans, humans often believed the creatures were immortal, which led to the legends about the gods of the volcanoes flourished in the area. If the creature moved too far from a source of intense heat, the Cherufis slowly hardened and turned into a mass of solid rock. Nobody knows if they reanimated if put back into the volcano. No one has actually ever seen a Cherufis moving through the magma. The creature may have been hardy enough to live close to the mouth of the volcano and not become overcome by the gases. Whatever it was, the locals sent a lot of their young ladies to their deaths to keep this thing away. Talk about a hot date. Oh, that was just uncalled for. But a lot of what I say is. There are some really weird sounding creatures scattered all over our planet. The names are translated from their native tongues to English, which sometimes gives them a name that has nothing to do with what they originally were called. One of these creatures is called the Grootslang. It is a terrifying beast said to live in a deep cave in South Africa, where it guards a treasure of diamonds and precious gems. Kathy's not happy. She's sitting up on the cat tree, hollering her head off. Groot slang means big snake in Afrikaans and Dutch. For those who don't know this, the Dutch ran South Africa for 342 years. That's why a lot of the names of their towns were in Dutch and not in African. The Grootslang is an enormous monster snake with the head of an elephant. I would have to see one. Well, have to. I'd love to see one. But from a long distance off, and maybe on the other side of a thick plexiglass shield. The creature has tusks, ears, and a trunk. It is said to be older than the world itself and to have immense strength and cunning. Grootslang are said to have greenish gray and scaly skin, ears that are a combination elephant ears and cobra hood. They have venomous elephant tusks, a forked tongue, and an elephant-like head and front legs. They have a snake-like tail for the back half, and an elephant-like trunk that has a non-living snake head-shaped end, complete with venomous fangs. According to the legend, Grootslang was the first creature created by the gods, who were still experimenting and gave it too much power and intelligence. Realizing their mistake, they tried to split it into two separate species, snakes and elephants. But some Grootslang managed to escape and hide in the dark caverns of the earth, where they multiplied and became the guardians of the underground treasures. The creature is attracted to bright, shiny things, and so it amasses a huge treasure hoard that it protects from treasure hunters. Anyone trying to steal the gems will be allowed to enter the hole and then consumed once too far from the surface for help. The most famous dwelling of the Grootslang is a cave known as the Wonder Hole or the Bottomless Pit, located in Richtersveld, South Africa. The cave is said to be connected to the sea and other huge bodies of water, and to be filled with diamonds and gems that attract many adventurers and fortune seekers. Anyone who enters the cave risks facing the wrath of the Groot Slang, who can crush them with its coils and then devour them whole. There are a number of stories of prospectors venturing into the Wonder Hole and never returning. One man was able to escape only because he had dropped his torch when a huge flock of bats flew into him, and he was standing on a ledge looking at all the side tunnels. Had he ventured farther, he might have never made it back either. The legend of Groot Slang is based on the folklore and the mythology of various African cultures, especially the Khoikhoi and San people, who have lived in South Africa for thousands of years. These people have a rich oral tradition that includes stories of giant snakes and elephants and other animals that have supernatural power and can shape shift and communicate with humans. Some of these stories may have been inspired by real sightings of large pythons or maybe other reptiles that did live in South Africa, as well as by fossils of prehistoric animals that may have resembled the Groot sling, such as the Titanboa or the Diantherium. Some stories may also reflect the influence of colonialism and mining in the local environment and society. The legend of Groot Slang became more widely known in the 20th century when it was recorded by various writers, explorers, and journalists who visited or explored South Africa. One account was published by F.C. Cornell in his book, The Glamour of Prospecting. It was written in 1920. He said he'd heard the story from a local woman who lived near the Wonder Hole, and he verified the story by checking with the official records. The legend of Groot Slang has many variations and adaptations that add or change some details or elements of the story. The head of the creature looks like an elephant with huge ears and tusks, while other sightings say the tusks are actually the fangs, and the ears are more like the hood of a cobra. Some accounts say that the head and front legs belong to an elephant, while the back half is an enormous snake. Some prospectors say that Groot Slang can take on the form of a human for a short period of time. Some say the beast is not evil, but neutral, or even sometimes benevolent, and that it can help or protect people who are respectful and worthy. What was that saying? I'm not worthy. I never actually saw that movie. The creature's not just relegated to one location around the Wonder Hole, but there are other elephant snakes all over the southern part of Africa. It does not sound like a place I want to visit. I do have some listeners in South Africa. If any of y'all ever catch a photograph of this creature, send me a copy. I'd love to see one from a distance. An Oletiu is a gigantic cryptid bat, or it could be a flying reptile that lives in Central Africa. The word Oletiu comes from the fusion of the Ipulo word ole and the Nitai, and it is a name for a ceremonial dance mask used in representing demons. The name may be used by the Ipulo to refer to demons in general rather than just to this one creature. The Olitau was the subject in an episode of Lost Tapes, and it was described as a cave demon. It was shown as being a giant bat living in a cave in Tora Bora caves in Afghanistan. The real beast is found in Cameroon, which is southeast of Nigeria. Leave it to Hollywood to get everything screwed up. Hey, let's take this creature that lives in Cameroon and Move it to Afghanistan and make a bad TV show about. I watched those missing tapes episodes a couple of times. Nah, not even worth rewatching. Not even parts of them. Well, that was my opinion anyway. I'd much rather watch Kolchak the Night Stalker. Olitau are said to have a 6 to 12-foot wingspan. Their body is black, but sometimes their wings have been described as either dark brown or red. Their lower jaws are said to contain 2-inch long serrated teeth that are equally spaced throughout its mouth. Ivan T. Sanderson blazed the trail into cryptozoology investigations. Sanderson actually originated the term cryptozoology in 1947. He was one of the first in the scientific community to treat Bigfoot as a serious phenomenon. He helped to generate the excitement and scientific rigor that investigators of Sasquatch try to emulate today. If you've read or listened to podcasts about cryptids, you must have heard his name at least 100 times. While hunting hammerhead fruit bats in southern Cameroon, Ivan T. Sanderson said that an Olitau swooped down on him and his hunting companion, Gerald Russell. They were along a mountain stream in 1932. He called it the granddaddy of all bats. The Sanderson incident is often used as an example of the Kangamato sightings, which is a different creature. Sanderson and Russell were wading through a shallow river in the Asumbo Mountains in northern Mamfe after they'd stopped to retrieve a hammerhead bat that they'd shot. That's how they used to collect samples. Sanderson stepped on something and lost his balance, and as he was recovering, Russell shouted to look out. Sanderson said he looked up and he saw this huge black bat that was bigger than an eagle. As it flew past his head, he saw the teeth that were long as his finger and serrated. Russell tried shooting the creature, but it was moving too fast. When Sanderson was able to get his feet under him, the thing was gone. Just before it became too dark to see, this creature came flying back towards them. It was following the river, making a chattering sound with its teeth. Neither man was able to get the rifle up before the creature was gone. When they returned to their camp, they encountered several local hunters who had come to sell them animals. Sanderson told these people about their encounter, and the hunters told him that he had seen an olitau, a very feared animal. The hunters then fled from the camp. When they returned the following day and Sanderson and Russell refused to leave, they became kind of sullen. The fear the creature might come back and kill one or both investigators really put the hunters off, trying not to cough into the mic. Both men kept detailed diaries while in Africa, and when Sanderson consulted Russell about the sighting in 1970, he found that both their accounts matched in memory as well as what they had written down. Sanderson subsequently included another account of the sighting in investigating the unexplained in 1972. Sanderson said, "Whipping around towards Russell, I was confronted by an apparition such as I have never imagined existed, about 15 feet away and just above the level of my eyes. It was coming straight at me, awful fast, so I ducked down into the water. I got a very good and close look at its face, and, to put it fastidiously, that weren't no Boyd." He was saying bird, but in a funny way. If you listen to Cam Hale and Kyle Filson, you'll hear them talk about the hyenas and things. Well, Sanderson called it a Boyd. Its lower jaw hung down, and as the light of the sun was directly shining onto its face, I could have counted the huge white teeth if I'd had the time. They were a good 2 or 3 inches long, all about the same length, and all equally serrated, separated by spaces of the same width. The animal that flew at me had a muzzle more like that of a monkey than a dog, or of any kind of a reptile, in that it was not drawn out to a point. The whole animal was coal black in color, including its wings, which were quite opaque. It did not appear to be hairy, but then neither do most bats until you examine them in your hands. Recovering my gun, I swung around and called to Gerald to watch out for it to come back, and a short time later it did. But in those few minutes the last rays of sun had moved up and there was deep shadow over the river. We both blazed away with both barrels, but the great creature just sailed right over us, uninterrupted and making a sound, so fast it was going. In fact, its speed of flight was much greater than we had estimated, and this speed may have been the reason we missed it, though Gerald is deadly at snap shooting, and it was almost on top of us. I have often wondered if we did hit it, but that our shot, which was for collecting small animals, just failed to penetrate its hide. Alternatively, we may simply have blasted holes through its vast wing membrane. We made haste back to our camp about a mile upstream. The biggest bat in the world has a 6 foot wingspan. The stories of the Oletao is twice that big. The boys in the white lab coats need to get out of the lab and go have a look for things that they don't want to admit may exist. Now, notice Sanderson wrote about this extensively, as did Russell. This brings to mind the point if you are ever in a situation where you see or you hear or you experience something, write it down. Even if you say to yourself, I'm never going to tell anybody about this, write it down. Write it down in a book that you will be able to find later. I don't know how many times I've talked to people who have a really good story to tell. They wrote it down in a journal or a log book or some notebook, and now they can't find their book. Write it down as detailed as you can, even if it doesn't really make good sense. It's a memory enhancer for, say, 10, 20, 30 years down the road when you have a change of heart and you want to write about or at least tell somebody. I always tell people you go on a ghost hunt or something, carry a notebook. If you see something, if you click a picture of something, if you hear noises in the dark, quickly jot down the time and the place because later, like an hour, 2 hours, a week later, when it's time to recount what happened, your memory's going to be messed up because a lot of things happen over the course of an evening. Write things down. It won't kill you. Yet, hardly ever see anybody with a notebook on any investigations. The Tatzel worm is a dragon-like beast encrypted, reported from the Alps and the mountainous areas covering parts of Austria, Italy, and Switzerland. I did a show about this weird beast back in July 2021. Roddy had sent me an email asking about the Tatzel worm, and so I did an entire show on it. I'll just go over it briefly for those of y'all that missed the show or don't remember hearing it. This sort of dragon is known by several names in different regions. Some call it the Stollen worm or tunnel worm. Others call it the Bergstutzen, mountain stump, because some folks mistook the beast for a log until it moved. A spring worm or jumping worm makes sense since some folks have seen it jump. The creature is also called the Dazel worm and the Protzel worm. People report seeing this thing in the Alps along the southern border of Switzerland, northern Italy, parts of Germany, and Austria. The Totzel worm has a snake-like body between 2 to 6 feet in length, with two clawed front legs, no hind legs. It has smooth, hairless skin covered with delicate scales. Its most distinctive trait is a large head with big eyes that are similar to the head of a cat. The Totzel worm can grow to at least 6 feet long, but some specimens, possibly juveniles, are a lot smaller. Local folklore holds that the Totzel worm is able to defend itself by expelling poisonous fumes that are capable of killing a human. Hey, my dog can do that. In 1934, a Swiss photographer named Balkin was able to catch the beast on film. He got one photo of what he said was the Totzel worm as it was laying under a tree in the Alps. He said the creature darted away right after he took the photo. This is back in a time when you'd click a picture and then you had to turn a knob to advance the film before you could take a second photo. And while he was turning the knob, the creature ran away. The creature's existence was accepted as a fact in the Alps, and it appeared in several books on alpine natural history and hunting. Swiss naturalist Frederick von Schunde was convinced of the reality of the creature, and he wrote about it in 1861. He said in Bernese Oberland and in Jura, the belief is widespread that there exists a sort of a cave worm, which is thick, 3 to 6 feet long, and has two short legs. It appears at the approach of storms after lying dry spell. Some witnesses say the creature looks like a fat snake with the head of a cat. The creature lives underground in caves until it needs to hunt for food or water. In 1828, a man found a dead Totzel worm laying in the brush beside a mountain trail. It had been partially eaten by birds, but there was enough to know that it wasn't anything normal. The body was shipped off to Heidelberg, where it disappeared into some back room. In 1930s, Dr. Gerhard Wensmeyer and Hans Fulcher collected the evidence of 60 witnesses. All agreed it was 1 to 2 feet long, cylindrical in shape with a tail that ended abruptly. It had a large, blunt head that grew directly from the body with no narrowing for a neck area. The eyes were large and the body scaled. It hissed like a snake or a cat. There have been sightings further south in Europe as well. Similar creatures have been reported in France, Italy, and Sicily. An Austrian schoolmaster came across one in 1829 while exploring a cave on the Tempelmeer. After looking at the creature for several minutes, he came to the conclusion that what he was looking at was a giant salamander. He said, I started to look for the entrance to the cave. Suddenly I saw a snake-like animal sprawled on the rotting foliage that covered the ground. Its skin was almost white, not covered by scales, but was smooth. The head was flat, and two very short feet on the fore part of the body were visible. The Totzel worm did not have large claws, but short, atrophied-looking feet. Its length did not exceed 40 or 45 centimeters, about 15 to 20 inches. Most probably, the Totzel worm is a rare variation of a salamander living in moist caves and only rarely coming to the light of day. There have been reports of something that sounds like the Totzel worm from Denmark in June of 1973. 2007 in Austria, a 12-year-old boy said he saw a brown, 20-inch long lizard on the banks of the Enns River near the town of Turnberg. It had a wide head and it only had two front legs. 2009 in Italy, over a period of several years, a number of people in Veltelnia Valley near the Swiss border reported sightings of an agile bipedal lizard approximately 5 or 6 feet in length. Being bipedal, it must have walked or run on its hind legs, so there must have been at least four legs, not just two. Since then, there have been other sightings, many of them deemed hoaxes. Stories have persisted, some claiming the Totzel worm is capable of leaping 9 feet in the air. That's quite a jump. And others claim that it squirts green blood when it's attacked. The desert dwelling horned lizard will squirt blood from its eyes as a means of defense. If you saw that episode of X Files, you'll know what I'm talking about. The one where the guy was dressed like Carl Kolchak. As weird as this sounds, it's true. Maybe the Totzel worm does the same. Most recently, 2009, a sighting of a Totzel worm-like creature in Treviso, Italy, was chalked up as nothing more than a few escaped monitored lizards. It's funny how many creatures escape every day to be seen as cryptids. Wherever the Totzel worm has been seen, the reports tend to be disregarded. Kind of like how Bigfoot gets so many encounters, yet science act as if everyone is either mistaken or crazy, or it's just some guy in a gorilla suit. Have you ever tried to buy a gorilla suit? Those things are expensive. There have been many sightings of the so-called claw worm that some people have even been taken to the emergency room with a bite that they report that came from the creature. Some reports say the Totzel worm is green and covered with slimy mucus. Many reports were that the witness attempted to stab the Totzel worm. They say that its blood spewed out onto them, burning where it splattered. This is like how when Heinrich von Winkelried had killed the dragon and the blood had gotten on his skin and killed him back. He was killed by a dead creature. Oh, by its blood. As I was going through all the reports of the Totzel worm, I found it being called a dragon, a snake, reptile, or lizard, amongst all the other names. The creatures are said to be aggressive. They can jump, some say 6 or 10 feet. They hiss when they're angry. They're venomous, and sometimes so venomous that even their breath is deadly. I've worked with a few people that were like that. They also have tough scales that are impervious to most weapons. Totzel worms have been known to attack humans and livestock, both for food or for self-defense. Believing the creature to be a relative of the Gila monster of Mexico, the beaded lizard, an Australian schoolmaster gave the Totzel worm a scientific name, Heliderma europaeum. Despite this, the creatures are not recognized by the scientific community at large. Once again, it's the boys in the white lab coat not wanting to get out of the lab. The German literature, Totzelworm are generally portrayed as European dragons. The poem Der Totzelworm by Joseph Victor von Sheffield is written from the point of view of the Totzelworm. The creature is recounting its days, terrorizing the mountainside, and the laments that humans are no longer afraid of him. Additionally, a play called Der Totzelworm depicts the epin- eponymy, eponymous, yeah, the dragon as a small serpent with claws that can grant wishes. Eponymous. Eponymous. That's a word you don't see every day. Every once in a while, I'll come across a word, and when I'm editing my notes, I don't catch it. And I don't say, oh, I better look that up, find out how it's pronounced. Over the last 10 years, people of Trastevio, a region in Italy on the Swiss border, have reported sightings of an unusual creature described as an agile bipedal lizard about a meter tall, or 40 inches, and nearly 2 meters long, or about 80 inches. Sightings of the Totzel worm have become so rare, cryptozoologists were beginning to believe that the creature may have gone extinct. Wait, a meter isn't 40 inches. I thought it was 30. Y'all that use meters, let me know. Is it 30 inches or 40? I looked it up. I did. But when I wrote it down, I think I screwed it up. Meter, 30, 40. We don't use metrics in the United States. Thank God. I had a hard enough time with inches and feet. In the summer of 2009, a young student of agricultural science spotted the animal. When she told folks about having seen the creature, she was mostly laughed at. Yeah, good old scientific community. Don't believe anything a witness says. Gotta see a body, darn it. Gotta see a body. And then when they see the body, oh, that's not really the creature. Or they come out and they say, oh, yeah, we knew it was there all along. You mumble, mumble, mumble. Anyway, that's the way the scientific community behaves. And that's why I refer to them as the boys in the white lab coats. If they ever actually start doing their jobs, maybe I'll call them the men in white lab coats. Okay, then the women will object. People in white lab coats just doesn't sound right. I don't call them the girls in the white lab coat because then the women would complain. Anyway, yeah. The woman said she knows that she wasn't mistaken. She wasn't dreaming. She saw this creature clearly with her own eyes. She said that it approached her, walking on its hind legs. The anterior legs were very short. It resembled a prehistoric velociraptor. Sorry, not the rear legs. The front legs were very short, like a prehistoric velociraptor, and generally it was like a monitor lizard. While monitors move on four legs, this one was upright, walking on two. Its back was nearly 80 centimeters. Once again, is it 80 centimeters, about 30 inches, I believe, above the ground, and its head was nearly a meter or 3 feet up off the ground. I guess it was 1.5 or 2 meters long. Now that's what she said. The monster reappeared in July 2009, observed on several occasions by local witnesses from Tressivio and Ponte. It is not an iguana, it is less massive, and we saw it running, people told the local paper. Many people no longer doubt it. With the summer and the warmth, the strange reptile comes out of its hiding place. A fruit farmer from Ponte had seen it in July. He said, I had parked my tractor above the village on the road into Val Fontana. It looked like a lizard with a long tail. It resembled a kangaroo, but it had scales. Therefore, it must have been a reptile. Zoologist Richard Freeman wrote that it might be the Australian lungfish. Lungfish are a bizarre group of fish. Their air bladders are modified to act as lungs that allow them to gulp air. This is distinctive advantage in times of drought. The South American and African species can also hibernate in periods of hardship. The fish burrow into the mud tunnels or build a cocoon of mud about themselves. There are 6 species, 4 from Africa, 1 from South America, and 1 from Australia. This sounds almost believable. Lungfish are found in fresh water. We don't know all the types of creatures living out of the way places. Maybe what people are seeing is some kind of a catfish slash lungfish. The stories about how the blood burned people could be just stories. Or maybe there's some kind of a creature we just don't know what it is. It's like the Loch Ness Monster. They say it looks like a plesiosaur, but plesiosaur all went extinct, therefore it can't be real. They didn't say it was a plesiosaur, they said it looked like a plesiosaur. A little bit of a difference there. Maybe it is some kind of a creature that looks like a plesiosaur, but it's not. Well, anyway, until we actually catch one and sit down and examine it, it's still just going to be a cryptid creature. As recently as 2009, many reports were made in the Trasivo area of Italy near the Swiss border. Authorities chalked up most of these reports to missing monitor lizards. that had escaped from their owners. Some of the sightings were even said to be raptor dinosaurs. Only the oldest residents of Trasivo called the mysterious creatures by the name that they have always known them as the basilisco, yeah, or basilisk. That was the Italian name for the tatzelworm. The basilisk, too many weird letters, was the legendary creature also known as the Serpent King. The older residents would call the creature by the name that they knew it. The tatzelworm could be any one of a number of creatures that the folks seeing it confused what they saw with what they had heard growing up in the area. A giant salamander seen in a dark location just might look like a cat with a snake's body. Add to this the hissing sound coming from it, and you can see how people might think it's something else. I doubt all the reports of people seeing some kind of a bizarre creature that looks like two animals stuck together can be written off so easily. Ulysses Aldovandi was a well-trained naturalist. He studied the dead body that some unknown creature, and not knowing what it was, he called it a dragon. He had to call it something. You can't just tell your assistant, "Bring the thing." You might wind up with a plunger. Yes, that's an old Warner Brothers cartoon reference. Sylvester the cat would get stuck somewhere and his son would yell, "Mother, bring the thing." And then she would walk by carrying a plunger. Yes, I watched Warner Brother cartoons when I was little. You had to. I am not going to wait for modern day scientists to declare the tatzelworm real or not. I can't say for sure they exist. I've never seen one myself. I've never seen Bigfoot either, but I know a lot of people who have, and I believe them. So, what is a tatzelworm? Maybe it's just something that we haven't figured out yet. My listeners in Germany, Italy, France, that area, hey, if you get out in the Alps walking around, carry a camera and be ready to click a picture in case you see it. And if you do, let me know what you see. I'm always ready for another good story. If you do have something like that you'd like to send in, send it to strangethings@arcanasa.com. Hey, I'll put you in my next book. As if bears weren't scary enough, how about a bearilla? The bearilla is a relatively new name for a cryptid that very little is known about. They are mostly spotted in northern states and the Canada, and they go by several regional names. Some folks say the bearilla is actually the dogman or a Sasquatch. Those who saw one say it looked more like a bear with the body of a gorilla. The first reported sighting of one of these creatures occurred in Nicholas County, 1972. The elderly man who reported it described it as being half bear, half gorilla, or the bearilla. This creature is a biped. It walks on 2 feet like us. Reports usually put it at 6 feet tall, with powerful shoulders and long arms. A bear can walk on 2 legs, but they shuffle along, and their front legs are not as long as what people are seeing. Bear don't have shoulders like gorilla. A few people thought they were seeing a werewolf, but with a massive body. In Kentucky, they have something called the Gateway Werewolf. The Gateway Werewolf was named due to its stomping grounds throughout the gateway to the Appalachians. Locals report sightings dating back as long as people have settled the area. This creature is sometimes referred to as a dog-faced Bigfoot. I have to wonder why there are so many varied cryptids out there. Bigfoot, Dogman, Bearilla. Could it be folks are seeing the same basic creatures, but with varied body types? Kind of like how Arnold Schwarzenegger doesn't look anything like Warwick Davis. They're both humans, but very different. Arnold Schwarzenegger is 6'2" and weighs about 240 pounds. Warwick Davis is 3'6" and weighs 140 pounds. Could all these bizarre creatures running around be related from the same basic group, and we're just seeing large hair covered creatures that look different, but they're the same creature? An alien running into both Schwarzenegger and Davis at the same time might think they're seeing two different species. Barilla has an aggressive streak. There have been 3 instances of aggressive behavior by this cryptid. 2 of these resulted in physical injury, one of which had to be treated at the local hospital. The victim was treated for severe scratches along his back and shoulders. The broad shouldered beast has the body of a bear, a long pointy muzzle like a wolf, hands with dagger like claws, and canine teeth. It also has huge shoulders and long muscular arms. This broad shouldered beast has the body of a bear. Well, I already read that. Kentucky, Wisconsin, Michigan, Canada, and Pennsylvania have all had reports of cryptids that looked more like a gorilla than a Sasquatch. Maybe someday we'll have a TV show called Finding Bearilla. I doubt it. The areas where the creatures have been reported have a lot of caves running through the mountains. Nobody knows how many of these caves might be connected. Just one more reason not to go cave exploring. Just outside the capital city of Saudi Arabia, Riyadh, is the Marube Cave. It is also known as the Profitable Cave and the Treasure Cave. Oh, and Crystal Cave. The locals also call it the Dolls. Dahls, not doll like play toy. The cave is a large collapsed entrance. At the opening, there's a warm breeze that is slightly cooler than the desert's 115-degree temperature. The cooler air comes from the depths of the cave. The crystal helicite on the walls and the ceiling give the cave its name, Crystal Palace. Dolls in Arabic are pits or sinkholes. They're prominent in Arabic culture from pre Islamic times to the tales of the 1001 Arabian Nights. Dolls have been a featured part of stories alluding to vast unknown spaces underground. In Arabian lore, caves are believed to be they are believed to house lower jinn that are sometimes known as ghouls. An article written about the dolls by an unknown author says locals told us that the dolls were thought to be the home to the jinn, the spirits best left alone by humans. I was reminded of this belief when I squeezed down into one very tight hole. I was halfway down the cable ladder, swinging to and fro inside a large, almost round room, when I heard what sounded like a distant moan. I followed the sound, crawling through a small opening on my hands and knees into a long, low tunnel with smooth, almost white walls and a floor of soft red sand. The farther I made my way into it, the louder the strange wailing grew, and the more beautiful the passage became, until it seemed that every bit of the ceiling was covered with curling, ivory covered cave deposits. It looked like an upside down stage crowded with hundreds of beautiful but out of step ballerinas. In the last room was a sort of an alcove, and in the wall above it a small hole about 3 inches in diameter. I poked my flashlight through the hole and I looked over into a bizarrely decorated room. Eventually, we managed to tunnel through the soft sand under the wall of the Closet of the Jinn, but we could go no further. Throughout Marubu Cave, there are passages filled with thousands of human and animal bones, all mixed together. A carbon dating of the oldest bones date back to 1200 years ago. The newest human remains date to the early 17th century. These bones are from a variety of species and they include camels, horses, gerbils, gazelles, and humans. The locals believe the bones were carried in by some sort of a predator. Some of them have teeth marks on them. So something was dragging the bodies into this cave and then eating them, both animal and human. Among the locals, there is a belief that ghouls are responsible for this feat. They argue that not venture too deep into the cave for fear of a harmful encounter with these wrathful jinn. A ghoul is a being that preys on the bodies of the dead. Should you run into one, it might have taken on the appearance of its last meal. You see somebody you know died last week, a good friend of yours. You think you must be mistaken. Well, don't get too close. Ghoul are also known to kill people that get too close to them. An Dong Cave is located near the Laos Vietnam border. Why am I having difficulty with Vietnam? I was never there. I was too young. Yeah, when the war ended, I was still only 16. Otherwise, I was an A1 draft pick. My brother was physically incapable. He had a nerve condition, caused his jaw to lock up. He didn't have lockjaw, but so they gave him a deferment, and then they looked at me like, "Hey, you're our man." I didn't mind being in the army. It was interesting, but boy, some of the things you had to do, some of the people you met. Anyway, getting back to the Sandong Cave, it's located near the Laos Vietnam border. It is the largest known cave in the entire world. Well, that's what they say. Since most huge caves have never been fully explored, nobody can say for sure. Back when the cave opened for tours in 2013, visitors began reporting mysterious sightings of reptile like humanoid creatures, with at least one person who was abducted and never seen again. The local man who first discovered the cave, Hoi Khan, encountered what he described as a devil creature. He described the being as having a human body, but with skin and face structure closer to that of a dragon or a lizard. He says he took a picture of the creature, but I cannot find a good copy on the internet. I didn't search too much since I had a whole show to do. There are a lot of photoshopped images, but not the one I was looking for. That is highly annoying. When you go looking for a picture and you get a bunch of photoshopped garbage and a lot of reports that you know aren't true, but all they do is they muddy the water. Ancient aliens had some evidence about the cave in Vietnam. Hang Son Dong is one of the few unexplored places on Earth, which is linked to mysterious sightings of strange reptilian and gray creatures that stand on two legs. There are legends about these creatures who are similar to the seraphim or the winged serpents in the Kabbalistic tradition. The name translates as Mountain River Cave and belongs to the Phong Na Ki Bang grotto system in central Quang Binh province, Vietnam. It was discovered accidentally in the 1990s by Ho Khan while he was visiting the jungles in central Vietnam. In 2019, Howard Limbert, a British cave explorer and the leader of the British Cave and Research Association expedition team, worked with the editors from NBC to provide an update about the discovery of Vietnam's colossal cave. They only allow 1,000 tourists in the cave each year. Too many people going in, you're going to damage something. Ho Khan is a Vietnamese logger who was born in the rural hills of Phong Nai. After losing his father in the Vietnam War, Ho Kan began foraging for rare wood in order to earn money for the family. He spent years in the jungle and he became knowledgeable about everything in the area. 2009, Ho Kan led members of the BCRA expedition to explore the cave. According to Limbert, his team first explored the Sandong Cave 1994, and the river that goes through this cave sinks in an enclosed valley with no way in at the sinkhole site. According to local residents, Sandong Cave has a strange group of creatures that are believed to dwell within it. They describe seeing reptile like humanoid beings emerging from the cave, and they believe that they actually live deep underground. Reptilians have been reported in many caves all over the planet. Those were the same creatures that Phil Schneider encountered under the Dulce, New Mexico uh, base when they were building that underground tunnel. Every time I say the name Schneider, I think of the Bonehead Truckers videos and the way he says Schneider all the time. And now I can't say Phil Schneider's name without thinking of that. Ike Stevens. If you get a chance, watch his videos. It'll give you something to laugh about, but at the same time, it will make you a little less bad driver around 18 wheelers because some of the things that car drivers do to truck drivers, it's ridiculous. Anyway, bonehead truckers, if you get a chance. Real truck drivers don't wear flip flops. A routine military patrol encountered some bizarre things deep in a cave in Afghanistan. January 25th, 2002, U.S. Marines in Afghanistan experienced sonar interference coming from a cave near Tora Bora, which rendered their sonar cave mapping system useless. A sonar cave mapping is a non intrusive method of surveying the subsurface to investigate underground utilities such as concrete, asphalt, metal, pipe, cables, or masonry. It can also show where caves and tunnels are, where some folks upstairs can deal with them appropriately. It's nothing like that gadget from the movie Prometheus. Not that cool, but it gets the job done. Believing there might be a jamming device built by the Taliban or Al Qaeda, a squad of Marines were sent in to have a look. Have you seen how the troops avoid booby traps? They use silly string and you spray it along the tunnel. It will drape over a wire, but it won't trigger it. Kind of cool. A real good use for silly string. The men moved it deep into the cave, running into a few thousand bats. One of the Marines stepped on a booby trap, which caused him to fall into a deeper tunnel. He landed hard, breaking several bones. Laying there, waiting for the pain to set in, he saw something go flying by him. His companions wasted no time getting down into the hole. The Marine was dazed and confused and in a lot of pain by this time. The injured man said that he'd seen a woman moving around him in the dark. Well, this got his fellow Marines on edge. As the medic worked on the injured man, the rest of the squad went to find out what was causing the interference. Nobody wanted to have to come back later to finish what they'd already started. When the squad failed to return by their set time, a second squad, a much bigger squad, was sent out to investigate. As they got close to the cave, they spotted one of the first squad limping along the trail. He was bleeding and his uniform was shredded. He told them they had run into some kind of a cave demon deep underground. All the men of the first squad were dead. When asked if he was sure, he said that their bodies were in pieces. Not wanting to risk more men, the entrance to the cave was blown up, leaving the dead bodies behind. The military are supposed to never leave anyone behind. That's what they say. That's what they tell you. Well, that doesn't ever seem to be the case. I've heard way too many instances where men's remains were left during a hasty retreat, like what happened on August 31st, 2021. Someone yelled, "Run away," and everybody did. No telling how many troops, both living and dead, might have been left behind. I know the Pentagon says they got everyone out. Not like they would ever lie to us. Mac Tonnis was a UFO writer. His last book was called The Cryptoterrestrials. He suggested the reason why the 1950 era Space Brothers were so concerned about our nuclear weapons tests, saying that we were going to destroy our planet. He theorized that they were really from Earth, not from another planet. If we succeeded in destroying the planet, we would be destroying their home as well. Tonus also suggested that the black eyed grays might be using our DNA, cells, eggs, sperm, and so on, to try to save their waning civilization by reinvigorating their race. Being from the same planet, their DNA would be closer to ours. Not wanting to associate with us, for one reason or another, these creatures lived deep underground. Maybe somewhere in one of the domes found all over our planet, maybe even deeper than that. Tonus said, I envision the cryptoterrestrials engaged in a process of subterfuge, bending our belief system to their own ends. And I suggest that this has been occurring in one form or another for an extraordinarily long time. I think there's a good deal of folklore and mythology evidence pointing in this direction, and I find it most interesting that so many descriptions of ostensibly aliens seem to reflect staged events designed to misdirect witnesses and muddle their perceptions. I regard the alleged hybridization program with skepticism. The flying disc that flew from Washington to Texas back in 1948 began to slow down right before it encountered our jet fighters, almost as if it wanted them to be able to catch up, possibly a staged encounter. Deep below our feet, or maybe just a few feet, are creatures that, if encountered, might just view us as their next meal. Giant lava monsters that want to feed periodically to keep them destroying the place. I'd love to see a Groot slaying, but like I said, from a long distance off. Giant hair covered creatures walking around as if they own the place, which, being so big, well, they probably do. Are these flesh and blood creatures we have to avoid if we want to keep living? Or are they projections being used to terrorize us so that some unknown beings can feed on our emotions? There are vast areas of our planet yet to be fully explored. Some people think, what with modern technology, the entire planet has been gone over. That would mean that huge airplanes couldn't simply vanish without a trace. We don't know what all might be living right alongside us. Maybe these beings are from some alternate dimension, and they are as terrified of us as we are of them. Can you imagine a bunch of Bigfoots sitting around talking, and one of them says, I saw a hairless creature walking through the woods, and all the other Bigfoot just roll their eyes at him? Hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, let your neighbors know what they're missing. Till next Saturday, this is Chris James for Strange Things. And remember the extra music.